Good afternoon. My name is Dan Scripps, Chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission, and I call this meeting of the Commission to order on October 24, 2023 at 1 o'clock p.m. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chair Scripps,
Present?
Commissioner Peretick,
Present.
Commissioner Carrion.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Today's meeting is being held in person at the Commission's office at 7109 West Saginaw Highway, Lansing, Michigan. We are also hosting this meeting remotely using Microsoft Teams. It is compatible with all browsers except Safari. Telephone relay service is available through the phone option. If you are participating via Microsoft Teams, you may also turn on the live captions by clicking on the More button at the top right of your Teams window, then clicking on Language and Speech from the drop-down menu, and finally clicking on Turn on Live Captions. As indicated in the notice for today's meeting, if we lose the remote connection, the Commission will not recess. The meeting will be recorded and available for future reference on the Commission's website. In addition, the Commissioners can receive comments via mpsc_commissioners@michigan.gov. For reference, this email is also included in today's meeting notice. We will have an opportunity for the public to make comments as provided in the agenda. A few notes about this. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and one per person. If you would like to make verbal comments, you must do so in person or remotely through Microsoft Teams or call into the meeting by phone. For individuals attending in person and who want to make a verbal comment, please fill out a comment card. Comment cards are available at the front table near the podium. I see some of you have them. For individuals participating remotely by Microsoft Teams and who want to make a verbal comment, you may click on the Raise Hand button at any time to be queued up for comment. For individuals participating remotely by phone and who want to make a verbal comment, you may press *5 at any time to be queued up for comment. Public commenters on both Microsoft Teams and on the phone are added to the same speaker queue and will be called upon in the order they enter the speaker queue. Please do not lower your hand or press *5 again, or you will be removed from the queue and lose your place in line. And to minimize disruptions, attendees participating by Microsoft Teams or by phone will be muted until we reach the time for public comment. The first order of business is approval of the agenda for today's meeting.
I move for the approval of the agenda for today's Commission meeting.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve today's agenda. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The agenda is approved. The next item of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the October 12, 2023 Commission meeting.
I move for the approval of the minutes from the October 12, 2023 Commission meeting.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the minutes from the October 12, 2023 Commission meeting. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by a unanimous vote. The Commission meeting minutes of October 12, 2023 are approved. The next item of business on the agenda is the approval of orders and minute actions on the consent agenda, and today the Commission is assisted by Staff Attorney Jana Bachman. I recognize Ms. Bachman. Ms. Bachman, you may be muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
Good afternoon. Today's consent agenda consists of one communications matter. The proposed order for this matter has been thoroughly vetted by the Commission's technical and legal staff and is ready for your approval.
I move for the approval of the order on the consent agenda.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the order on the consent agenda. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The order on the consent agenda is approved. I recognize Ms. Bachman.
Item 4A1 is case number U-18425, which involves an application from Consumers Energy Company for ex parte approval of a new power purchase agreement with SDS Hydropower LLC for the output of the Ada Hydro Plant. The order before you approves the application.
Thank you, Ms. Bachman. I move for the approval of the order in case number U-18425.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the order. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by a unanimous vote. The order in case number U-18425 is approved. I recognize Ms. Bachman.
Item 4A2 is case number U-20147, which involves a matter on the Commission's own motion for certain regulated electric utilities to file their distribution investment and maintenance plans and for other related matters. The order before you establishes dates for the filing of comments on the most recently filed distribution plans for Indiana Michigan Power Company, Consumers Energy Company, and DTE Electric Company.
Thank you, Ms. Bachman. I move for the approval of the order in case number U-20147.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, I would just briefly like to highlight this opportunity for public input on these 5-year electric distribution plans for DTE Electric, Consumers Energy, and Indiana Michigan Power in this order that is before us. We value the public's input and would like to build a robust record on the plans that were submitted. And the due dates for each of the comments for each of the company's plans are staggered. I&M's comments are due January 19th, Consumers February 16th, and DTE March 15th. And I look forward to hearing from all of the interested parties.
Thank you, Commissioner Paratek. Is there any additional discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the order. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The order in case number U-20147 is approved. I recognize Ms. Bachman.
Item 4A3 is case number U-21496, which involves an application filed by DTE Electric Company for ex parte approval to accrue an allowance for funds used during construction on construction work in progress for projects within the company's renewable energy plan. The order before you approves the application.
I move for the approval of the order in case number U-21496.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the order. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The order in case number U-21496 is approved. I recognize Ms. Bachman.
Item 4A4 is case number U-21502, which involves a matter on the Commission's own motion to require Consumers Energy Company to show cause why it should not be found in violation of the Commission's consumer standards and billing practices for electric and natural gas service, MISH Admin Code R460.101 et sec, the Commission's service quality and reliability standards for electric distribution systems, MISH Admin Code R460.701 et sec, and the Commission's technical standards for gas service, MISH Admin Code R460.2310 et sec. Staff member Jake Thalen will describe this order.
Hello, good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. I am Jake Thalen, a specialist in the Compliance and Investigation section with the Michigan Public Service Commission. The order before you is requesting the opening of a show cause evidentiary hearing docket based on the findings in case number U-21458, which opened an investigation into Consumers Energy's meter malfunctions, estimated billing, and delay in new service issues. On July 7th, 2023, the Commission issued an order in case number U-21458 requiring Consumers Energy to file a report detailing 13 specific items as the initial step in the Commission's investigation into the company's meter malfunctions, estimated billing practices, and delays in new service. Consumers Energy filed this plan to the Commission on August 4th, 2023, and staff analyzed Consumers Energy's filing and filed its response on September 29th, 2023. On December 12th, 2022, in case number U-20639, the company requested a temporary waiver of electric meter testing requirements in accordance with the technical standards for electric service, seeking approval of alternative testing procedures due to the upgrades from 3G technology to 4G technology. The 3G technology was set to be phased out by the end of 2022. The request was originally approved on December 19, 2019, and an extension was granted on February 23, 2023. Consumers Energy indicated that due to supply and staffing constraints, the company would be unable to meet the original time frame listed in the 2019 waiver application. The company indicated that the meter replacements would be complete by August 2023, and staff had been assured that Consumers Energy would be able to meet this deadline. During the transition, staff was aware that some customers would receive an estimated bill. It was unclear how many customers would receive estimated bills and for how long they would potentially receive these estimates. Staff started to receive a number of complaints with customers who received consecutive estimates prior to January 2023. It was determined through the Commission complaint process that some of these meters had malfunctioned, and customers were unable to read their own meters due to a display error. Due to the malfunctioned display error, many customers were unable to read their own meter, making the possibility of an actual meter reading impossible. These concerns continue to rise. Consumers Energy identified to staff on May 1st, 2023, that 109,000 3G meters still needed to be installed, with 126,000 customers receiving an estimated meter read. And those customers, 38,000, received more than 3 consecutive estimates. In addition to these issues, residential and commercial customers were also complaining to staff about long delays occurring when requesting new service to be installed. These delays appeared to be caused by equipment shortages. This docket ordered an investigation of these issues. Consumers Energy filed its report on August 4th, 2023. In its report, Consumers Energy acknowledges that its recent performance has not met the Commission's expectations and notes that it takes the situation seriously and began executing a robust plan to correct the root causes of these problems before the Commission's order in this case, and that its plan has already resulted in significant estimated meter read reductions and 90% delivery of new service installations within 15 business days. Staff filed its response to Consumers' report on September 29, 2023. In its response, staff examined the data submitted by consumers. Staff notes that the company acknowledged deficiencies that occurred in transitioning meters from 3G to 4G, including meter malfunctioning and the need for estimated billing, as well as an ongoing pattern of customers experiencing delays in new service installations for both electric and natural gas service in excess of what is allowed under the rules. Staff also stated that while many aspects have been corrected or improved, the vast problem should not have existed in the first place. Staff identified potential violations of the MPSC billing rules, electric service quality and reliability standards, and gas technical standards. The Commission has reviewed the company's report and staff's response in case U-21458 and finds that an evidentiary show cause hearing is necessary to examine the issue of consumers' alleged rule violations and to obtain accurate information regarding the nature and extent of these violations as noted by the staff's response. The order before you states that Consumers Energy shall file testimony regarding its consecutive estimated billing issues, its failure to provide actual meter readings in compliance with the billing rules, and new service installation completion issues, and shall show cause by November 14, 2023, why Consumers Energy shall not be found in violations of the Commission's consumer standards and billing practices for electric and natural gas service, the Commission's service quality and reliability standards for electric distribution systems, and the Commission's technical standards for gas service. The Commission staff shall continue its investigation into these potential rule violations and audit the reliability of the information provided by Consumers Energy. The Commission staff shall provide testimony regarding its findings in this investigation, and a pre-hearing has been scheduled to take place on December 4th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thalen. I move for the approval of the order in case number U-21502.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to thank MPSC staff for their diligent work on this matter. A big thanks to you, Mr. Thalen, and to the whole customer assistance team who have investigated this and upheld the standards and rules that are in place to protect Michigan customers. I'd also like to note the importance of public comment and complaints and how critical public input has been to identifying and solving the issues that are addressed in this order. We actually learned of the multiple issues and addressed here as a result of public comment at our town halls, informal questions and complaints to our customer assistance team, both in person, over the phone, and through electronic means, and through the formal complaint process. Our customer standards and billing practices and our service quality and reliability standards exist for a reason, and it's important that all of our utilities in our state are meeting these standards. I look forward to resolving all of the issues identified.
Thank you, Commissioner Peretick. Is there any additional discussion? We will now have a vote on the motion to approve the order. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The order in case number U-21502 is approved. Item 5 on the agenda today is a presentation on the Gas Electric Harmonization Forum, and we're pleased to welcome Robert W.G., co-chair of the North American Energy Standards Board Gas Electric Harmonization Forum, to be with us today. I've known Bob for a number of years. He is a former chair of the State Commission in Texas, a leading figure in our national association, the National Association of Regulatory and Utility Commissioners, and certainly a thought leader on these and a whole host of other issues. And Bob, welcome to the Michigan Public Service Commission, even if virtually today, and we're excited to hear some of the findings from this important report.
Chairman Scripps, members of the commission, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. It is an honor and a privilege to be appearing before your commission, and I also want to thank you for accommodating me, allowing me to participate virtually rather than having to work through the airline system to try to do it in person. But I do hope to be in Lansing perhaps one day in the near future. You've invited me to deliver a summary of our report. I will. I have a slide deck that I see already booted up by your staff. Thank you very much. And I'll talk from the slides, but I also will speak extemporaneously and try to get them through them fairly rapidly so we can allow for the balance of time for questions. If you can go to the next slide, please. This is my customary disclaimer. All the remarks I'll make today and statements will be my opinions only. They are not opinions shared necessarily by NAESB or NAESB leadership or by any of my clients, past, present, or future. Next slide. I want to begin by explaining just who is NAESB. You know, you hear this acronym and people want to know, what does NAESB stands for? NAESB is the North American Energy Standards Board. And basically, it's the only organization where both the natural gas and electric utility industry continuously intersect. Their purpose is to create business and commercial standards for both sectors. Go on to the next slide and you'll see a little bit of history here. Just some quick facts. NAESB was founded about almost 30 years ago. It was begun originally as an organization to standardize the exchanges between the interstate pipeline companies that operated separate electronic bulletin boards so that they could communicate one another to allow gas to flow freely through the interstate market. In 2001, its mission was expanded to include both the wholesale and retail sectors of the electric utility industry. So fundamentally, they now exist as a forum for the development and promotion of standards to support the wholesale and retail natural gas and electricity markets. And you can see some of the organizations that they intersect with on a continuous basis. They are also a member of what's called the ANSI accreditation organization, which is the American National Standards Institute, which is the global organization that certifies standards setting organizations. Next slide. Let me give you a little bit of background about how this NAESB Gas Electric Forum was started. Almost 2 years ago now, in November 21, NERC and FERC staff issued their report on Winter Storm Uri. Hard to believe 2 years have gone by, right? It's already October of 2023. And in that report, they had a number of recommendations, but one recommendation was for there to be convened a gas electric harmonization forum to address a number of questions that were not adequately investigated at the time the staff put together the report. You recall Winter Storm Uri was in February of that year, so the staff was under the gun to come up with a set of recommendations. But they said, create a forum and have both the gas and electric industries discuss these issues, and then we'll see what to do after that. That was followed by a letter in July of last year from then FERC Chair Rich Glick and NERC CEO Jim Robb to NAESB, asking NAESB to convene this forum. And there were two specific tasks, and I've written them down verbatim on the slide. This is probably the only text I'll read verbatim because it's important to understand the mission of this forum. And that was to identify actions that will improve the reliability of the natural gas infrastructure system as necessary to support the bulk electric system and to address recurring challenges stemming from natural gas electric infrastructure interdependency. And the second task was to propose actions, plans, and deadlines. The important point I want to stress personally is that this was not a pro-gas or anti-gas initiative. Rather, we viewed our mission as pro-reliability, what needed to be done to bolster the reliability of the grid as supported by the natural gas infrastructure. And so NAESB turned to me and to two other individuals who I've known for many, many years and worked with and think very highly of: Pat Wood, former FERC chair and also a former commissioner with me, former chairman of the Texas Public Utility Commission, and Sue Tierney, also a former Massachusetts utility commissioner, and like me, a former DOE official. And so between the three of us, we have collective cumulative experience of over 100 years, which means two things. One is we're experienced, but also we're very old. So then we were given the task of convening this forum. Next slide. This is a slide that was provided me by NAESB, and I wanted to share it with you because it's important to understand that the harmonization issue between these two industries is not new. In fact, it goes back 20 years. You'll see around 2003, then FERC Chairman Pat Wood asked NAESB to develop market coordination standards between the gas and electric sectors. You recall in the slide I showed you previously, NAESB had just expanded its mission to include electricity 2 years earlier. So the process of trying to harmonize the two industries actually began 20 years ago. And you can see a number of significant events have occurred since then. In particular, there were some significant notice of proposed rulemakings that FERC took up in 2014 and 2015 that emanated out of the winter storm of 2011 to try to harmonize or synchronize the gas day with the day ahead power day. And I'll get into that in just a moment. And then also you could see going up to 2021 Winter Storm Uri, and then the July 2022 letter to us. And you'll see also at the bottom of the slide, it shows when shale gas began to really take off. And you can see, I think it's not, yeah, it's captured there on that last line. You'll see around 2008 is when we started to experience a surge in gas use in the United States, particularly for power generation. And I'll mention that in just a moment. Next slide. So when the forum began, we started our meetings in August of last year. We had 14 meetings to address these questions, and there were basically 17 topics broken into 3 categories. The first was measures to improve gas electric information sharing for improved system performance during extreme cold weather events, measures to improve reliability of natural gas facilities, again during freeze events, and then third, measures to improve the ability of generators to obtain fuel during these extreme weather events. And we know that demand would be extraordinarily high. Next question, next slide rather. Why do we ask these questions? This is a slide from EIA, and basically what it shows is that gas's fuel share for power generation today is about 40%, which has doubled over the last 20 years. Importantly, not only is gas the dominant fuel for power generation today, power generation is the dominant customer for the natural gas industry. So you can see the blue part of this graph that depicts the amount of gas being used for power generation out of all of the uses for natural gas in our country up to current day since 1950. And you can definitely see that as a consequence of these two systems being so closely aligned, they are increasingly interdependent upon one another. Next slide. So let me just touch a little briefly on the report process for you to understand how we got to our recommendations. Again, I mentioned that we had 14 meetings, 741 individuals from 375 companies. The 20 recommendations that we put on the table were subjected to a vote by all of the participants. And there was a NAESB voting tabulation process, what they called a balanced voting process, which doesn't give one individual, one sector of the lion's share of the weight, but it evenly distributes the voting process. Those votes were tabulated, and I'll get into some of the votes in just a moment of their responses to the recommendations. You can see how the votes are broken out by sectors, and then we can proceed to do a little deeper dive into the report. The report itself was, as I mentioned, delivered in July of this year, just a few months ago. Next slide. What did we conclude? We had 20 recommendations, all premised on the finding that systemic weaknesses persist and remedial actions needed to be taken to avoid another Storm Uri or even Elliott blackout. There were no consensus on some recommendations. There were some sharply divided opinions on some between the wholesale electric and wholesale gas sectors. And also, finally, the report recommended 3 studies, including 2 directed at FERC and NERC that I'll touch on. And then finally, the chairs, the 3 co-chairs, me included, recommended creating a gas reliability organization akin to NERC, and I'll get into that in just a moment. Next slide. What happens to the recommendations after we put them out on the street? 3 things can happen. The first is that they can be used to develop a commercial standard through the NAESB standard setting process, which ultimately, if it's successful, is a consensually arrived at standard. Or we requested actions by others, and those would be the RTOs, the trade groups, and in a couple of instances, Argonne National Lab. And then finally, we've requested FERC and NERC state policy action, and I'll touch on that again in a subsequent slide. Next slide. The current situation, as I mentioned, is that we experience systemic weaknesses that are persistent that require immediate action. I'm not going to read all of this, but basically what it attempts to capture is that we have inadequate information regarding available pipeline capacity. We still lack adequate synchronization of gas and electric markets. And basically, our system requires our generators to nominate day-ahead bids before knowing exactly how much contracted gas they're able to access. Electric generators during 3-day high peak weekends, typically in the winter, typically during holidays, have limited access to natural gas after Fridays because typically all the gas is contracted at the close of Friday. And although you talk to the gas producers, they say, no, we don't close markets. As a practical matter, the markets are not liquid sufficiently during weekends for generators to be able to access that on an emergency basis. And then finally, we realize that we need to engage in cross-sectoral coordinated planning. Gas is going to continue to be used in the future. It's going to be used differently as more renewables start penetrating into the resource mix. Peaks will change, loads will shift, and supply for gas will be stressed. So both the electric industry and the gas industry need to engage in coordinated planning to determine how the systems will collaborate in the future. Next slide. Let me try to give you a little bit of information on how the votes broke down by subject matter. Again, this deals with communication of pipeline operational status. And basically what it means is the pipelines the interstate pipelines are subject to FERC regulation today. And they do post information, their data on their websites and report them out as required by FERC rules. This recommendation asks that this be done more in real time and more granularly because the bulk electric system operators say that they could use that information to be able to understand better exactly when gas is going to arrive and where. And again, this vote, unfortunately, did not result in a consensus. 85% of the electric wholesale sector supported it, only 46% in the gas wholesale sector. But interestingly, even within the gas sector itself, there was sharply divided opinion. 80% of the producers within the gas wholesale sector actually supported this recommendation. It was the pipelines that did not. Next slide. Another concern is requiring greater pipeline producer transparency. And basically, currently, Argonne National Lab does have a tool where they gather data from 75% of the interstate pipeline system and synthesize that into a format which better allows you to understand the situational awareness and the communications between the gas systems and the bulk electric system operators. We recommended that this tool be expanded to include the entirety of the interstate pipeline network and to include producers. And so the vote here again was split. 80% of the electric wholesale sector supported it. And there was a split between they and the gas wholesale sector were only between 57%. I believe that was the interstate pipelines, and 66%, excuse me, 57% of the producers supported it. Only 66% of the gas pipeline supported it. So you can see there's still a divergence of opinion on whether to support the proposal to allow the National Lab to gather this additional information to be able to share it on a select basis. Next slide. This is an instance where we actually can declare victory. And this is the old bugaboo of trying to better align the power day and the day ahead power day and the gas day, where there's lack of synchronization. This is an issue that was brought to the attention of FERC in 2011 to try to align them, and it was soundly rejected at the time by the gas industry. I'm pleased to report that the voting indicated that both the electric wholesale and gas wholesale sectors now support this proposal by a high 80% vote. And you can see I added a little rainbow and a champagne bottle there. We should celebrate. So this is one small victory we achieved out of the report. Next slide. Here's something that you would think would just be common sense. And this is something, again, a gentle recommendation we make of state PUCs and applicable state authorities. And that is basically engage with the people in your market, producers, marketers, and intrastate pipelines, to ensure everything is working on a fully functioning on a 24/7 basis whenever you know an extreme weather event is occurring. We also indicate that if the state lacks authority, namely for intrastate pipelines, we're asking FERC to adopt regulations to achieve identical outcomes. And I would anticipate that last sentence there is what probably drew opposition from the gas folks, because only 87% this proposal was supported by 87% of the electric wholesale, but only 41% by the gas wholesale. And I would presume that's because we're asking FERC to step into state jurisdiction. But ordinarily, I would assume that this proposal, even without that sentence, would have been widely supported, you would hope. Next slide. Another one where we thought should have made some common sense, we're asking states to consider development of weatherization guidelines to make sure systems are protected, particularly for gas production, processing, and gathering in anticipation of extreme weather events. We're not mandating anything. We're saying that states should consider guidelines appropriate for their own region or jurisdiction. Again, split vote, 92% supported by electric wholesale, only 55% from gas wholesale. Next slide. Here's this final set of recommendations that I'll touch on. These are two studies that we recommended be undertaken because we thought that at least this was worthy of further examination. And we're asking FERC and NERC, with the assistance of DOE funding, to undertake two studies that address adequacy of market incentives. And those would be market incentives for additional strategic natural gas storage facilities and market incentives to see whether there's a need for additional firm transportation capacity on the gas system. And you can see that both the sectors of the industry, gas and electric, generally supported both recommendations. One of the important aspects of this is that we're asking, if we find that there are lack of financial incentives, would it be appropriate to look to out-of-market solutions? In other words, public sources of funding, particularly for natural gas storage, because in those instances, storage can act as a surrogate for additional transmission capacity. And so if you need to site strategic storage facilities to be able to draw down on during the winter time, and if there aren't adequate market incentives to finance them commercially, would there need to be potentially a non-public or a public option for sources of funding? So those are two studies that we've asked be undertaken by FERC and NERC, NARUC rather, through the assistance of DOE. Next slide. And then I'm going to conclude by just talking a little bit about the forward, which has drawn some attention, obviously. Again, this was not intended to be part of the formal report. In the report itself, we did discuss the potential of creating what was called a natural gas coordinator that did not receive, let's just say, a warm reception, obviously, by some of our participants. We decided not to really do a deep dive into whether to create a gas reliability organization, particularly because we knew that that was going to require congressional enactment to create one equivalent to the current NERC. But at the conclusion of the voting process, and we saw how the votes were widely divided on certain key recommendations, we concluded that we needed to sort of give this process a jump start by calling for the creation of a gas reliability organization. Some have asked, well, what does this mean? Does it mean we require congressional legislation? Well, if you were to look at the current NERC, yes, it would. But I would remind people that NERC existed as a voluntary organization for 30 years before standards were mandated in the 2005 Energy Policy Act. And so there's nothing to prevent both industries from at least beginning the process of creating a voluntary organization. At the very least, one of the lessons we learned is that the conversation between the two sectors needs to continue. Information needs to be shared. I've mentioned to Jim Robb already, I said, Jim, one of the problems we have is that every time we have an outage in the winter, we look through the rearview mirror to try to figure out what happened. And look at where we are now. I'm giving you this report today, 2 years after the NERC-FERC study came out examining the causes of Winter Storm Uri. Okay, we can't keep revisiting this on a post hoc basis years later. We're much better off if we create a reliability organization, because we can plan together, we can have conversations, and we might even be able to address instances where if there is an outage, we can identify the root causes much earlier than waiting months or even years to identify just what happened. We titled this forward, Houston, We Have a Problem. It's drawn a lot of flack for that because people think it's an attack on the gas industry. And as some of you, I know that Chairman Scripps, you and Commissioner Peretic probably have already heard me say, this is not an attack on the industry. I chose the title because I'm from Houston. I began my career in the gas industry in Houston. And like what happened in Apollo 13, where there was an explosion on a spacecraft in 1971, what happened was NASA didn't stop sending men to the moon. In fact, after that explosion on a spacecraft, where the men were brought home successfully and safely, NASA landed 4 more manned space missions over the next 2 years. They dusted themselves off and they fixed the problem. We can do the same with the gas electric industries, ladies and gentlemen. This is not rocket science like Apollo 13. Thank you so much. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. G. Really, really informative, and I should note that you're speaking to at least one rocket scientist. So,
Okay.
This has been an issue that we've been looking at since at least 2019, following the fire at the Ray Compressor Station during the January 2019 polar vortex. Governor Whitmer tasked us with developing a pretty broad-ranging statewide energy assessment, which we delivered in September of that year, and have done follow-ups since, just to ensure that it wasn't a report sitting on a shelf, but in fact a playbook for action and tracking our progress against the different recommendations and learnings from that. It's an issue here, both because of our growing use of gas in the electric sector, and also because 75% of Michiganders heat with gas as their primary fuel, and of course our large industrial sector that relies on gas, as your chart showed. So I guess for states who really are seeing the challenges associated with this, have seen them firsthand in recent years, you had a couple of recommendations to the state regulatory sector, and I guess sort of given the opportunity to talk to the 3 of us today, as well as the many people we've got in the room, what specific things would you hope to see from commissions like Michigan and elsewhere in terms of how we work to implement some of the recommendations that were identified?
Well, there are some specific taskings that we throw into the laps of the states, namely look into perhaps trying to create some template for standardization of weatherization guidelines, and also ramp up your involvement in working with all of your stakeholders. If you know you're going to have an extreme cold weather event, make sure that all the systems are fully operational to be able to for your power generators to be able to access gas. Talk to them beforehand. Don't wait until, that 3-day holiday weekend. Begin that process should begin now. In fact, it's already mid-October. It may, I would urge you to stay on top of this going into this winter, because we could, I'm hearing stories from other utilities in other parts of the country. They're very concerned about the availability of gas in order to be able to address the demands during the winter season. And so I would recommend that you begin that process now. I know that NARUC is going to be taking this up as an organization, as an important issue. We threw obviously a couple of recommendations into their lap, so they're going to have to take it up at some point, and they're going to be talking to FERC as a consequence. So I would encourage all of you to be involved in that process. And then finally, I also think you do not underestimate the power of the bully pulpit. You don't necessarily need to have influence by voting out orders like today, an agenda on a commission meeting. You can give speeches, you can raise awareness. All three of you are very visible public servants. I would encourage you to, as you go about meeting the public, keep bringing this up as an issue, as something that you're paying close attention to. I'm a true believer in the notion that a threat is even more powerful than a punch, quite frankly. Just the fact that the public knows you're on top of it, I think, can get people to act.
Yeah, so Apollo 13 disaster was actually the birth of the discipline of systems engineering. And systems engineering is the coordination between different pieces of engineering in a project. So, and like the engineering at the boundaries. So for example, between the mechanical systems and the electrical systems on a spacecraft. So I'm seeing a lot of parallels here with what you're trying to do, Mr. G. So it's clear that the electric system needs the gas system to coordinate to maintain reliability of our electric grid. In your presentation, you mentioned that natural gas's fuel share for power generation is almost 40% of the total resource. And that's not flexible. Generally, these generators can't switch their fuel source or time shift their production at a large scale. But what's not as clear to me is whether the gas industry's need for the electric system is reciprocal or commensurate. Power producers represent a smaller percentage of gas sales, albeit still significant, as you showed in your plot from the EIA. But maybe more importantly is that it's easier for gas suppliers to shift their product in time, either through storage or through the pipeline system, and also between customers. Do you share that view, or do you see that as any of the core of the problems for coordination?
Commissioner Paratic, I think you're right on point. First of all, on Apollo 13, I appreciate your granular level of understanding of what happened. My understanding of what happened on Apollo 13 was I was a freshman in college when that occurred, and it was in the mainstream press. And also I watched the movie by Ron Howard. So that's my level of depth which was an excellent movie, by the way. I'm not so sure it's entirely 100% accurate, but these movies never are. But back to your question, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think the problem that we face is that that risk of mistakes or loss is not equally shared across the energy ecosystem. The bulk of the risk is being borne by the electric sector. The gas sector, all the way from the wellhead to the processor to the pipeline, doesn't perceive risk the same way. And they operate their systems, as I tell people, their central mission is not to maintain electric reliability. Their central mission is to produce molecules of gas out of the ground, get it transported to market and sold. And they're, in many respects, indifferent to where that market is, whether it's to a power generator in the United States or whether it's going to be liquefied and sent to Germany. And so as a consequence of that, they're thinking, and I've talked to the gas industry, and that's not off the mark. Their goal is really to produce gas molecules, get it sold, And you're right, as a consequence, their level of commitment, and this is not a criticism necessarily, it's their business model. Their level of commitment to make sure that gas gets sold to power generators is to be sure founded in contracts. They want to adhere to those contracts. Good for them. But at the end of the day, they're not going to simply redesign their entire system to accommodate the electric grid. I just don't see that happening, absent there being some form of oversight or compelling need to do so.
Not to be redundant to Commissioner Peretick, but I was thinking along similar lines, which is to say, if you look at the report and the breakdown of voting results, there's so much variation between wholesale markets and retail energy markets. And if you get even more granular to think locally, if a utility is dual fuel or not, there can be so much variation. And as you're saying, some of these incentives to behave differently. And I guess just on that note of projection in terms of how markets will change, or you really just, I think, got to the answer of my question. What ultimately might motivate change across different roles or stakeholders or positions within the market? So I heard that standardization will help, but I am just curious, kind of in a forecasting mode, as electrification increases too. What does the maybe retail side look like? If there is anything specific to the retail market's participation or embracing of these recommendations, if you can educate me more on how the standards apply there.
Yeah, very good. I appreciate the question, Commissioner. I didn't talk much about the demand side at the retail level and what role they could play. And there is a recommendation. I didn't touch on it in my slides, but if you look at the report, one of the recommendations is that we ask states to better encourage demand response, particularly in anticipation of critical peak periods, not just demand response on the electric side, but also on the gas side as well. If you have and some of the LDCs already have demand side programs where they ask their customers to minimize their consumption of gas. So I think that needs to be part of the whole solution set to address, because during winter periods, we know we're going to be short of supply. We know there's going to be high demand. How can you better manage the entire ecosystem, not just for power generation, but also, as you know, you folks regulate LDCs. You don't want your LDC customers to find that the pilots don't work or they need to keep their homes or businesses warm. You need to have that constant flow of gas to be able to meet that need. So I do think that demand response measures need to be encouraged. And also, there is another recommendation that asks state commissions to begin to publicize that a lot earlier. Don't wait until the day before there's going to be a cold snap, but get the word out. Be consistent, be uniform, be thorough.
That's really helpful, Bob. And yeah, there's just a lot to unpack as we continue to work to better harmonize both here in Michigan and across the country. So I appreciate the work and your willingness, along with your co-chairs and the broader members of the forum, to highlight these important issues. So I look forward to continuing to hear as you go out and do the public work around raising awareness around this, and look forward to be partners in that effort. So thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, Chairman Scripps. It's been an honor and a privilege. I appreciate it.
We've now reached the time reserved for members of the public to address the Commission. As mentioned in the notice for today's meeting, we'll take public comments in the following order. First, from individuals attending in person, and then from individuals participating remotely, either through Microsoft Teams or the phone, who have entered the speaker queue. As a reminder, this public comment period is for commissioners to listen to comments and concerns and not to answer specific questions. When providing comment, please indicate your name and where you live if you're willing to share, so that we have it for our records. And again, please limit comments to one per person and keep them brief, no longer than 3 minutes, so we have a chance to hear from all who have comment or who would like to comment. It looks like we've got a couple of cards here, and so we'll go in order. Corinne Stralka?
Got it wrong today.
I know.
I'm sorry. It's Corinne Strzelka.
Strzelka, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I forgot.
I'm not going to read it, but I just want to say that I love your email address.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to read the letter that my husband and I wrote to ITC. This is regarding case number U-21471. It's the ITC proposed transmission line from Oneida Township to, Nelson Road to Oneida Township. And we wrote a letter in opposition. We would like to express our concern and objection to the installation of a 375 kilovolt transmission line through our farm. We object to this installation for these specific reasons, which are not limited to. My husband thinks he's part attorney. Health concerns for us and our neighbors who are affected, but the neighbors don't actually have to forfeit their property rights. They don't have the line going through their properties, but they're going to be right next to the lines. Our ability to raise livestock on our farm, this includes the safety of the animals and the ability to raise them using sustainable practices. The compaction of farmland. We have not tilled this ground for over 10 years in attempting to use regenerative farming practices. ITC will compact over 18 acres of farmland and the loss of our property value and property rights. We will not allow access to our property voluntarily. There are other routes that are available that are not being considered. ITC just assumes that we will give them the needed right-of-way without demonstrating any need or give us any provisions of the easement. Sincerely, Corinne and Larry Strzelka, 14705 West Grand River, Eagle. And also I wanted to let you know, I've collected several names of people who are in opposition, and there's been at least 20 letters that have been emailed to ITC and to you, and maybe more because people don't let me know, but those are the ones I know of. And in Eagle Township alone, our 6 miles in Eagle Township, there's 12 out of the 18 properties. 2/3 of the people have already written you letters and oppose, and I'm sure the other 6 property owners just aren't even aware of it yet. But hopefully next time I talk to you, I will have their letter sent in to you also. They will not let ITC on their property voluntarily and will only have their property taken away by eminent domain by condemnation, no other means. We've already determined to hire lawyers, and we've started working on that. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mrs. Strzelka.
Thank you.
Next up is Martha Kenyon, and then John Pung after that. Oh.
I am Martha Kenyon, 13801 South Hinman Road, Eagle, Michigan. We are also possibly affected by this, although it may not be eminent in our location. And the reason I say that is because Corinne here is talking about the preferred route. We are on the alternate route. So all the same issues apply. So we have here ITC, which is International Transmission Company of Michigan, out of Novi, Michigan. It says we have neither the preferred nor the alternate routes through Clinton County are acceptable by the owners and by the neighbors of these routes. We have talked with several of these different local peoples. Okay, here's what my thoughts are, my husband's and my thoughts. Are these towers, poles, lines in your yard or on your land? The wind and the solar is not profitable, as it is supported at the present moment by our tax dollars. It's not a feasible thing. Nor are they helpful to the agricultural lands and the wildlife in the next 15 to 30 years before those wind and solar fixtures will malfunction, break down, and then our lands will be littered with these defunct monstrosities. Remember that wind turbine movements disrupt bird migrations. I could also mention too, we know from out in the oceans, in the Atlantic Ocean, it has disrupted the whales. We have beached whales dead. So we have excessive noise, which causes human health problems. The solar panels will also generate heat above the black panels as black absorbs the sunlight, causing weather conditions, thunderstorms, etc., to increase or change above these panels and in this area. Also, the solar panels will need to be cleaned and washed yearly. Where do you think the water for this cleaning will go? Into our groundwater for us to consume. When these panels become defunct or malfunction, where do you think the toxic components of these solar panels will go? Into our groundwater for us to consume. So, we will be stuck with these transmission poles and lines littering our farm and our agricultural lands in the future. We do not want these lines in our community, our backyards. Do you want them in yours? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kenyon. John Pung and then Carol Sanborn.
Mine is more of just the same. We're a property, it'll be in my backyard near Westphalia, not on our property, fortunately, I guess, but we also own, we just recently purchased my grandfather's farm, and they will clear a 200 foot wide path right through it, clearing beautiful oak trees and I've talked to probably at least 15 different property owners that are affected by this project, all very much prepared to take it to eminent domain and fight this with every resource we can possibly come up with. It's devastating because these farms have been in our families for so many generations. It means so much to us, and there's no amount of money that is going to change our minds. I mean, we're just hoping we can stop it early. I too am trying to get a lawyer to help and organize, and like I said, we're obviously in the very early stages of this. We're just trying to do everything we can now to get the word out. Like, there's got to be an alternate route where people could welcome the income, could use the money. We don't want it. We don't need it. We're just hoping that there's an alternative. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pung. And Carol Sanborn.
Hi, I'm reading a letter from my son that my son has sent to you. It does refer to attachments, which I don't have, but you have it. He starts with, it's also regarding this project. I'm writing in opposition to the proposed Nelson Road to Oneida transmission project that would cross over my family's property in Lebanon Township in Clinton County. Although I am opposed to the entire project, I would like to see the planned route changed to avoid our property at the very least. There are multiple environmental and cultural reasons that the route should be changed. To begin with, the proposed placement of these power lines would hinder future construction on our property. This concern is compounded by the presence of existing power lines that have previously limited our ability to efficiently plan new construction projects. Moreover, the market value of the property would be significantly diminished as the existing house would be surrounded by power lines on at least 3 sides. In addition to these concerns, it's worth noting that our property has a local reputation as a historical burial site for Indigenous Native Americans. Here is a link to the historical book which mentions our property, the Norwood Tabor Farm, having been used in the 1860s for this purpose. He has attached pictures of my family's parcel for reference, outlined in orange. This project would create a lasting blemish on our cherished local landscape, which is highly regarded by many in the area due to its minimal development compared to most other areas in this part of Michigan. It is undeniable that local establishments such as the Maple River Campground will suffer adverse consequences unless the project plans are amended to relocate the lines further from the area. I had the opportunity to attend the ITC meetings held in the Maple River Campground on October 11th, where I engaged in discussions with individuals responsible for project planning and engineering. During our conversation, I proposed an alternative route of similar length that would traverse an area with fewer residential properties and align the power lines closer to an industrial setting. They integrated this suggestion into their GIS program, finding no apparent concerns with this alternative route. One of the attendees mentioned that the initial route selection was based on the GIS algorithm that considers factors such as the number of parcels, proximity to homes, wetlands, and more. However, following the meeting, I examined the official Eagly wetlands map and discovered an inconsistency in the wetlands GIS layer with the floodplain surrounding the Maple River. It seems that during the original wetland delineation process in our area, an oversight occurred, causing a particular area to be omitted from the classification as a wetland. This omission has contributed to the GIS algorithm incorrectly recommending the route through our property into the Maple River floodplain. This mistake can be attributed to a historical difference in vegetation management in the anomalous area, resulting in the growth of grasses that cause it to appear dry in aerial images. To complicate matters further, from the environmental and biodiversity perspective, the anomalous area has naturally progressed to an early successional stage of young lowland hardwood regrowth. This type of lowland hardwood swamp is notably underrepresented in the region and is critical, increasingly rare game species such as American woodcock, ruffed grouse, as well as threatened and vulnerable species like eastern box turtle and eastern Mississauga rattlesnake. For your reference, I have attached images of the anomalous area, which I have outlined in red. A statement from Carol Sanborn: we will not allow access to our property voluntarily for these monstrosity electrical megalines. I have already spoken to our family attorney and will not hesitate to seek out an attorney that specializes in eminent domain cases. We have the support of all of our neighbors regarding this issue. I strongly urge ITC to reconsider their current plan and adopt the route I have suggested. This minor adjustment would significantly enhance the ease of securing easements for local landowners. I have contacted an attorney in regarding the bills that the Democrats and the governor are trying to push through. That's unconstitutional, it's un-American, and the government is the people's, not the states. So what they're doing is totally wrong.
Thank you, Mrs. Sanborn. Are there others who haven't filled out a card who would like to speak at this point? Mrs. Kenyon, when we wrap up, I'd like to get your card back just so that we have it. Thank you. Okay, we'll now turn to the remote options, either through Microsoft Teams or the phone. For individuals participating remotely by Microsoft Teams and who want to make a verbal comment, you may click on the raise hand button to be queued up for comment. When it is your turn to speak, please click on the mic button to unmute. Individuals participating through Microsoft Teams also have the option to turn on their camera. For individuals participating remotely by phone and who want to make a verbal comment, you may press *5 to be queued up for comment. When it is your turn to speak, press *6 to unmute. Public commenters on both Microsoft Teams and on the phone are added to the same speaker queue and will be called upon in the order they enter the speaker queue. Again, please do not lower your hand or press *5 again, or you will be removed from the queue and lose your place in line. Okay, we'll go to the... I don't see anybody with their hand raised. I'll see if anybody wants to raise their hand, or if you're on the phone, press *5. Okay, well, that concludes the public comment period of the meeting. Do either of you have any announcements today?
Yes, just one announcement. I just wanted to notify of an upcoming grant opportunity. The Department of Eagle has recently released an RFP opportunity for funding under the IIJA Section 40101D, which is called Preventing Outages and Enhancing the Resiliency of Electric Grid Formula Grants to States and Indian Tribes. The state of Michigan's formula allocation for this initial phase of a multi-year grant from the DOE is $16.3 million, and that will be available to eligible entities, including investor-owned, municipal, and cooperatively owned utilities. The program goals are to fund grid hardening efforts such as tree trimming, technology upgrades, microgrid opportunities, and more. And the response to the RFP is due to Eagle by November 17th, and more information can be found on the Grid Resiliency Funding Opportunities page on Eagle's website. And I just wanted to encourage all utilities to consider innovative projects for funding to increase the resilience of Michigan's electric grid.
Thank you, Commissioner Paratek. And just on that note, I would note that the U.S. Department of Energy, through that Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program, recently made a series of awards totaling, I think, $3.4 billion across the country, including $100 million to Consumers Energy and I believe $22 million to DTE for work to improve the resilience of the grid, as well as some regional awards. So kudos to both of those companies for pursuing successfully that funding. We're excited to see you put it to work. And then the last piece is just, I know all three of us are pretty excited over the football results over the weekend. I'm talking, of course, the Rice Owls winning 42-10 over Tulsa, and my Alma Scots winning 43-10 over Kalamazoo. And Commissioner Paratek, I think your undergraduate institution did fairly well as well.
It did, yes, thank you.
All right, well, with that, we'll conclude today's meeting. The next regular commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 9th, 2023 at 1:00 p.m. My staff's never going to talk to me again. Is there a motion to adjourn, Commissioner Paratek?
I move to adjourn today's commission meeting.
I second the motion.
We will now have a vote on the motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by unanimous vote. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. And we're going to take about 5 minutes, and then we've got a special recognition ceremony.